Detective Harris and Officer Jackson had seen it all, but nothing could prepare them for the shocking drop in crime that swept through the city after the unprecedented crackdown. As they dug deeper, what they discovered about corruption, hidden alliances, and the unexpected role of the community would leave Black America stunned. In the heart of the city, life had grown tense and unpredictable. The streets were lined with boarded-up buildings, and streetlights flickered as if warning passers-by to hurry along. Every corner seemed to hide a story of loss, fear, or violence. Residents had grown accustomed to the constant background hum of sirens and the occasional distant gunshot, sounds that had become almost normal. Families spoke in hushed tones about the dangers outside. Children were kept indoors after dark, and business owners had learned to lock their doors early, hoping to avoid becoming the next target. The city had developed a reputation for being untouchable by authorities, a place where crime seemed to operate on its own rules. For years, a shadowy network of criminals had manipulated the chaos, controlling neighborhoods with quiet precision. They knew which streets were monitored, which police precincts were stretched thin, and how to evade capture at every turn. These criminal operations were sophisticated, involving drug trades, burglaries, and organized theft rings that appeared invisible to the public eye. Rumors of secret alliances and silent agreements spread among residents, creating a mix of fear and frustration. People felt trapped in a city that no longer offered safety, yet escape seemed impossible. Despite the despair, some glimmers of hope began to emerge. Community leaders and local activists had started speaking up, calling for change and drawing attention to the alarming crime rates. They pushed for stronger law enforcement initiatives, increased patrols, and better surveillance, believing that if authorities could reclaim the streets, the city might breathe again. Still, most citizens remained skeptical, wary of promises that had failed them in the past. Then, the city announced a major crackdown on crime, a plan so large it shook the foundations of daily life. Authorities promised swift action, a coordinated approach targeting criminal networks that had long operated with impunity. Surveillance increased, undercover operations intensified, and specialized units were deployed to monitor hotspots where criminal activity was most concentrated. Residents watched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, unsure whether this would be another failed attempt or the start of real change. For the first time in years, there was a sense of possibility, a fragile hope that the streets might become safer. People whispered to one another about what could happen if the crackdown succeeded, imagining neighborhoods free of fear and families able to live without constant worry. But behind that hope lingered tension. The city had learned the hard way that crime was unpredictable, and those who had once thrived in darkness did not give up easily. The stage was set for a transformation, one that would shock the city and reveal truths hidden beneath years of violence and despair. The crackdown began quietly, almost imperceptibly, but its effects were immediate. Streets that had once felt lawless seemed different overnight. Surveillance cameras appeared on street corners, officers in plain clothes walked the neighborhoods, and police vehicles patrolled with a new intensity. Criminals who had once moved with confidence now paused, uncertain of where eyes might be watching. The city had not seen such coordinated law enforcement in decades, and the sense of tension was palpable. Residents watched from their windows, skeptical yet hopeful, wondering if the change would last or if it was just a fleeting attempt at control. As weeks passed, the results became visible. Robberies and violent incidents that had been a daily occurrence sharply declined. Businesses that had long remained shuttered cautiously reopened, and families tentatively returned to the streets. In the evenings, people spoke in small groups about the difference, cautiously optimistic that life could be different. The media covered the shift extensively, calling it a historic turnaround. Yet beneath the surface, investigators were working tirelessly, tracking patterns and movements of those who had avoided the law for years. Each arrest felt significant, striking at the heart of networks that had seemed untouchable. Despite the visible improvement, fear lingered. Many wondered whether the crackdown was driving criminals underground rather than eliminating them entirely. Reports began to surface of carefully orchestrated crimes that seemed almost invisible, smaller, targeted incidents that avoided detection yet reminded residents that danger had not disappeared. The city's transformation was undeniable, but the uncertainty created a tense balance between relief and suspicion. People were beginning to feel the fragile nature of safety, realizing that one misstep could undo the progress achieved. Unexpectedly, the crackdown also revealed hidden heroes. Ordinary citizens began cooperating in unprecedented ways, reporting suspicious activities and assisting authorities in small but crucial ways. Neighborhood watch programs gained momentum, local leaders organized community patrols, and a sense of collective responsibility began to take root. The city was witnessing a change that went beyond arrests and policing. A cultural shift was emerging. But just as hope seemed to bloom, investigators uncovered fragments of evidence suggesting that some criminals were adapting faster than expected. Their operations were evolving, becoming more strategic, and the authorities faced the challenge of staying one step ahead. The city had seen progress, but the story was far from over. The streets were quieter, safer on the surface, yet beneath the calm lay the tension of a city on the edge, waiting to see whether the crackdown could truly bring lasting change or if it had only paused a deeper, more dangerous game. Months into the crackdown, the city appeared transformed on the surface. Streets were quieter, businesses reopened, and the nightly sound of sirens had decreased. Yet behind the calm, investigators were uncovering a web of secrets that no one had anticipated. Hidden alliances between organized crime groups and corrupt officials came to light, revealing a system that had allowed crime to flourish for years. Financial records, clandestine meetings, and coded communications exposed a network that had profited from the chaos while pretending to fight it. The revelation stunned the public and cast doubt on everything they had believed about the crackdown's success. The arrests of low-level criminals had been visible and reassuring, but now it became clear that the real masterminds had operated in shadows, controlling entire operations from behind the scenes. Politicians, law enforcement personnel, and business figures were implicated in schemes that funneled illegal profits into legitimate enterprises, masking the flow of money while keeping the streets unsafe for personal gain. The city's residents, who had cautiously celebrated newfound safety, now wrestled with a sense of betrayal. People who had trusted authority figures began questioning whether the decline in crime was genuine or manipulated. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that some criminals had anticipated the crackdown and adapted their strategies accordingly. Certain crimes disappeared from public view only to resurface in more sophisticated forms. Burglaries, thefts, and drug operations shifted to high-security locations, while digital schemes and financial manipulation became the new tools of criminal enterprise. The complexity of these operations revealed a level of planning that few had imagined, demonstrating that crime had not disappeared but transformed. At the same time, media coverage intensified, amplifying the tension within the city. Stories of corrupt officials being arrested contrasted sharply with reports of seemingly untouchable figures evading capture. Public opinion was fractured. Some praised the authorities for their bold actions, while others feared that the crackdown had been carefully staged to give the illusion of progress. Citizens were caught between relief at the declining crime rate and suspicion that a hidden agenda controlled the narrative. Despite the chaos beneath the surface, the city continued to show statistical progress. Murders and violent crimes remained at historically low levels, a testament to both law enforcement efforts and community involvement. But the shadow of deception lingered. Everyone sensed that the calm streets hid a complex struggle, one that pitted the forces of order against an invisible, deeply entrenched criminal network. The city had been shaken, its foundation tested, and it became clear that the battle to reclaim safety was only halfway complete. The real story of the crackdown was far more intricate and unsettling than anyone could have imagined. As the crackdown extended beyond the city's central districts into the surrounding suburbs, an unexpected pattern began to emerge. While violent crime in inner neighborhoods had sharply declined, a series of carefully orchestrated heists began to hit wealthier areas, targeting high-end homes, luxury vehicles, and small businesses. The criminals had adapted, becoming smarter, faster, and far more strategic. Their movements suggested meticulous planning, as if they had studied every patrol route, surveillance camera, and police tactic before making a single move. Authorities realized that while the crackdown had disrupted some criminal networks, it had not eradicated them. Instead, it had forced them to evolve, using stealth and precision instead of brute force. For residents, the shift was unsettling. Those who had felt safe after months of relative peace now faced the frightening realization that danger had not disappeared, it had simply moved and transformed. Neighborhoods that had once been considered untouchable were now vulnerable. creating a sense of insecurity in places that had believed themselves protected. At the same time, crime statistics overall remained unusually low, leaving experts puzzled. How could targeted, high-profile crimes exist while general criminal activity seemed almost non-existent? Analysts began to speculate that a new type of criminal network had emerged, one that operated like a shadow corporation, planning carefully and avoiding attention, leaving only carefully calculated traces behind. Investigators struggled to keep up with this new breed of criminal. Traditional patrols and routine surveillance were often ineffective. Detectives noticed that the heist followed predictable patterns in timing and location, yet no one could anticipate the next strike with certainty. It became clear that the criminals had studied law enforcement strategies and were exploiting their knowledge to stay one step ahead. The city had entered a tense stalemate. The streets were quieter, but danger lingered in unexpected forms, invisible until it struck. Meanwhile, the public's confidence began to waver. Community members who had celebrated the crackdown started questioning the real impact of police operations. Was the drop in crime genuine, or were authorities merely shaping perceptions to create a sense of progress? At the same time, grassroots programs and citizen initiatives continued to grow, with residents reporting suspicious activity and keeping watch over their neighborhoods. These efforts, combined with law enforcement action, created a fragile equilibrium between safety and threat. Despite the challenges, there were signs of hope. The city's ability to adapt and respond, both at the official and community level, suggested that crime could be managed, if not entirely eliminated. But the story of the crackdown was no longer a simple tale of victory. It was a complex narrative of adaptation, strategy, and the delicate balance between law enforcement, community involvement, and criminal ingenuity. The city had changed, but the struggle for lasting safety was far from over, leaving everyone to wonder what would come next. As the crackdown entered its final phase, investigators discovered the most startling revelation yet. While the police and authorities had been the visible force behind the city's transformation, a deeper, less obvious factor had been at work: the residents themselves. Community-driven programs, neighborhood watch groups, and informal networks of citizens reporting suspicious activity had played a far larger role in reducing crime than anyone had imagined. Streets that had once been ruled by fear were now patrolled not just by officers, but by vigilant neighbors, each small act of involvement creating a ripple that reached far beyond its immediate impact. The city's safety was no longer solely dependent on law enforcement. It had become a collective effort, a community reclaiming its own space. The full scale of corruption uncovered earlier also added a layer of complexity to the story. High-level arrests had sent shockwaves through the political and business communities, yet some key figures had slipped through the cracks, quietly adjusting their operations to avoid detection. Despite this, the visible reduction in street-level crime was undeniable. It became clear that dismantling criminal networks required more than raids and surveillance. It required the cooperation of ordinary citizens, cultural shifts, and the rebuilding of trust between neighborhoods and authorities. Interestingly, the crackdown had inadvertently created a blueprint for long-term change. By forcing criminals to adapt, it exposed weaknesses in their operations and created opportunities for communities to step in. As criminal strategies evolved, residents became more engaged, learning to anticipate threats and protect each other. The city's collective vigilance turned into a form of invisible infrastructure, one that could respond to crime even before law enforcement arrived. Schools, churches, and local organizations played critical roles in fostering awareness, mentoring youth, and promoting alternative pathways that reduced the likelihood of crime taking root again. By the end of the crackdown, the city had transformed in ways few could have predicted. The statistical decline in crime was impressive, but the deeper story was far more significant: a cultural and social shift that made neighborhoods self-sufficient, empowered citizens to act, and restored a sense of safety and pride. The city that had once been suffocated by fear was now cautiously optimistic, resilient, and better prepared for the future. The lessons were clear. Real change did not come from arrests alone, nor from a crackdown executed by officials. It came from unity, vigilance, and the willingness of ordinary people to reclaim their streets. The city's journey showed that even in the darkest times, collective courage and determination could transform communities. What began as a law enforcement operation ended as a testament to the power of people, proving that lasting safety is never imposed, it is built, one small action at a time.